So a few years ago, I wrote this document with my colleague Jess Halliday called What Makes Urban Food Policy Happen? And it was published by an organisation I was a member of at the time. I was a member of the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems, which published this report. And what we did is we looked at what cities had been doing on food policy way beyond obesity, though one of the case studies was Amsterdam, the obesity policy in Amsterdam, which is a really interesting policy to look into when you're thinking about addressing obesity in cities. And what we went through is, and we said, okay, so what really is going to make policy happen? What can really make change happen at the city level? Again, with a strong focus on public policy, which is my area of particular expertise. And we identified enablers that could help cities really make change and get policy change onto the agenda. And the first bunches of enablers was about data monitoring and learning. That if cities work with researchers to carry out baseline research to understand really what the problems are in their cities, which are drivers of obesity. Secondly, that when they do put action into place, that impacts are monitored and new data are collected to understand really what's happening. And as a result of that, policies are introduced and changed, adapted and learned from as you go. So they're a first set of factors which can facilitate effective policy change at the city level. Secondly, we found that it was vital for cities to have into place multi-level governance. So they needed to have in place governance, the necessary powers to make these kinds of changes. So in some cities, it's going to be a lot less easier to make this happen than others. But I know that in Brazil, cities do have good policy-making powers. And the institutional home of where this change needs to take place needs to be clear. There needs to be a clear institutional home for this area of activity, obesity prevention through food, at the level of city government, and a governance body that's been established to oversee it, with multiple city government departments engaged in making this change happen. So the second bunch of factors is about city level governance. The third bunch of factors of enablers was around participatory policy processes. It's vital that if you're going to develop these kinds of changes in cities to really make a difference to acting in cities, you need to participate and include the communities in which you're trying to benefit and to serve. That's absolutely vital. So that's the communities that you're trying to serve, but also the many different governments, everybody who has a role to play within government and out of government. And inevitably, when you're dealing with people who come from different perspectives, with different interests, with different objectives, there are going to be differences in perspectives, and that conflicts and ideological difference are going to have to be acknowledged and managed. That should be addressed right away, that these issues will come up and need to be managed. The next bunch of factors needed to make change in cities is funding. Need to have part-time funded, partly funded by city government to show their commitment, but you need to overall get funding to really make sure that implementation is possible, preferably without restrictive conditions.